Someone asked me a question a few weeks back that I haven't been able to put down since. A young woman, a student, doing some kind of project on the war, she sat across from me with her notebook and she said, "Frank, if you had to pick 5 nights from all of it, the ones that never left you, what would they be?" I laughed a little when she asked it, not because it was a strange question, because I'd never once tried to count them. People assumed the biggest night was the worst one, and the worst one was the beach, and that's the whole answer. I understand that. The beach earned its place in the history books, and it should have, but a war isn't one morning. It's thousands of nights stacked on top of each other, and most of them never make it into any book at all. I could tell you about the landing. Other people already have, better than I could. What I've got instead are the nights nobody wrote down. A troop ship rolling in the dark, a ditch in a hedgerow, a kitchen table in a village I couldn't find on a map today, a tent with a lantern in it, a morning that didn't feel like the morning I'd pictured for 4 years. Some of those nights I remember for the fear in them, some for the quiet, some for a joke somebody made at exactly the wrong moment, which is somehow the moment you remember best. The history remembers the campaign. I remember the sound a canvas cot makes when a man can't sleep on it. I remember the smell of wet wool that never fully dried. I remember a woman's hands shaking as she poured wine she couldn't spare. You reach an age where the big picture stops being the thing you hold on to. The dates go soft, the order of things blurs a little, and I'll admit that to you honestly. But the nights stay sharp. I couldn't tell you the date of half of them. I could describe the light. So these are the 5 that came to mind first. Not the ones a historian would pick, not the ones with the most at stake, just the 5 that are still there when I close my eyes, the way they've been there for 80 years. The first one I think of is a night on a ship. Before any of it started, most people picture the crossing as one long, tense wait, everybody staring at the horizon, bracing for what's coming. And that's fair. That's not wrong. There was plenty of that, but that's not the night I remember first. What I remember is how sick nearly everyone was. Not from fear, from the sea. The ship pitched for hours, and men who'd been steady as anything on land were bent over rails or buckets, green in the face, apologizing to each other for it, which strikes me as funny even now. Nobody had room left to be brave. You can't be brave and seasick at the same time. It takes up all the same space. There was a boy near me, younger than I was, and I was young enough myself. He hadn't said much the whole crossing. Around midnight he finally spoke, and what he said wasn't about the invasion at all. He asked me if I thought his mother had gotten his last letter yet. That was it. That was the whole conversation. We talked about mail delivery for 20 minutes in the dark, 2 boys who might not see morning, worrying about the postal service. We played cards for a while by a covered light, badly, because the ship kept moving and the cards kept sliding. Somebody had a harmonica and played it low enough that an officer wouldn't hear. 3 or 4 songs, none of them finished properly. A few men wrote letters they didn't expect to send. A few just lay there with their eyes open, not sleeping, not talking, just breathing. Nobody talked about what was coming, not directly. We talked around it the way you talk around anything too big to hold in your hands. Somebody's sister was getting married in the fall. Somebody's dog had learned a new trick before he shipped out. Small news from small lives passed around like it mattered more than anything, because that night it did. I remember being afraid. I won't pretend otherwise. But I remember the fear feeling different once I'd said it out loud to the boy beside me, once I knew he had it too. It didn't go away. It just stopped being mine alone. That's the thing I took from that night, and I've carried it ever since. Fear you're carrying by yourself is heavier than fear you're carrying with somebody else. It's the same fear, it just costs less when it's shared. I don't know what happened to that boy after we landed. I lost track of him within the first hour, the way you lost track of everyone. I still think about the mail, though. I still hope it got there. The second night is one I've never been able to make sense of, and I've stopped trying. People remember the hedgerows as difficult country, thick and blind, the kind of fighting nobody could see more than a few yards of. History is right about that. It was miserable ground. But that's not what the night was about, not for me. It was raining, the kind of rain that gets into everything eventually. We'd stopped in a gap between 2 hedges, waiting on orders that hadn't come yet. There were maybe 6 of us crowded into a space built for 2, taking turns standing so somebody could sit for a minute. Somebody had a tin of something nobody could identify by smell alone, and we split it anyway because sharing it felt better than eating it whole. A man near me kept talking about his father's hardware store back home. Nails, mostly. What kind of nails held better in what kind of wood? I couldn't tell you why that stuck with me, out of everything, but it did. Another man kept humming the same 4 notes of a song none of us could place, over and over, until somebody finally told him to stop, and he did, and then 10 minutes later he started again without noticing. There was a man beside me, close enough that our shoulders touched most of the night. We didn't talk much. He offered me half a cigarette at one point, and I took it, and that was most of our conversation. Somewhere in the dark, not far off, something happened that I still can't fully account for. He didn't come back from that patrol. Another man, standing almost exactly where I'd been standing 20 minutes earlier, didn't come back either. I did. I've turned that over more times than I can count. Why him and not me? Why that spot and not this one? I never found an answer, and at this age I've made my peace with not finding one. Some things from that war don't resolve. They just sit there, unfinished, for the rest of your life. We kept sitting in that hedgerow after, because there wasn't anywhere else to go. Somebody offered around what was left of the tin. The man with the hardware store talked about nails again, quieter than before. Nobody said much else. That's the thing about that ground. It never let you see very far, and it never let you understand very much either. I've stopped expecting it to. Not the hedgerow the newsreels showed you. Just a wet ditch, and 2 frightened boys in it, and one of them was me. The third night was a good one, and I don't get to say that about many of them. People assume liberated towns were all celebration, flags out the windows, everybody cheering in the street. Some of that's true. I saw some of that myself. But the night I remember was quieter than that. We'd stopped in a village for a few days, resting, doing small repairs, waiting for orders. A family took a few of us in, more out of gratitude than anything we'd done personally. An older couple and a daughter who couldn't have been more than 16. They had almost nothing to spare. They gave us wine anyway, out of a bottle they'd clearly been saving, and I remember thinking they shouldn't be spending it on us. The daughter spoke a little English, badly, and I spoke a little French, worse. We managed most of a conversation out of gestures and wrong words, and a lot of laughing at ourselves. She wanted to know about America. I wanted to know if they were all right, really all right. And she kept saying yes in a way that told me they weren't quite. The mother cooked something out of almost nothing, and it was the best meal I'd had in months, and I've never been sure it was actually good or just felt that way because of who made it. The father kept refilling glasses that didn't need refilling. At one point he put a hand on my shoulder and just left it there, not saying anything. And I understood him better in that silence than in anything either of us managed to say out loud. We stayed up far later than we should have. Somebody found an old radio and got a scratchy station playing something none of us recognized, and the daughter tried to teach one of the men a dance step, and he was terrible at it, and everybody laughed harder than the moment probably deserved. I keep coming back to how much they gave us with how little they had. People who'd lost far more than we had, sharing what was left of it with strangers in uniform. That's rarer than people give it credit for. It's easy to be generous with plenty. It's a different thing entirely to be generous with almost nothing. I never learned what happened to that family after we moved on. I've wondered about it for 80 years. I hope the daughter got old somewhere safe. Kindness like that doesn't ask what it's owed first. It just shows up. I think about that more than I think about almost anything else from those years. The 4th night was in a tent, and it's the quietest of the 5, and maybe the heaviest. People picture field hospitals as chaos, and near the front lines, plenty of the time they were. Doctors moving fast, no time to spare for anyone. That's not the night I remember, though. A friend of mine had been hit 2 days earlier, not seriously enough to send him far back, serious enough to keep him still. I sat with them one evening because there was nothing else useful I could do, and sitting seemed better than not sitting. We didn't talk about the war. We talked about a fishing trip we'd planned to take together after, a lake neither of us had ever actually seen, just heard about from somebody else. We built the whole trip out loud, what boat we'd rent, what we'd catch, who'd forget the tackle. Neither of us believed all of it. It gave us somewhere to put our attention that wasn't the tent. A nurse came through every so often, checking on him, checking on the others, moving quietly so as not to wake anyone who'd finally managed sleep. She didn't say much either. She didn't need to. Just her being there, steady, unhurried, made the whole tent feel less like an emergency and more like a place people were simply getting better in. I stayed until well past when I should have gone back. He fell asleep partway through, and I kept sitting there anyway, listening to him breathe, which sounds like a small thing and felt like the only thing that mattered that night. I never did anything for him that a doctor would call treatment. I just stayed. I've come to believe that's worth more than people give it credit for. Waiting with someone is its own kind of help, even when you can't fix a single thing that's actually wrong. He made it. We never did take that fishing trip, not really. Life got in the way it does, but I still think about that lake sometimes. One we invented together in a tent that smelled like antiseptic and canvas. I couldn't tell you, even now, whether sitting there did him any good. I'd like to think it did. I've never been sure, and I've stopped needing to be. The fifth night is the one that surprises people most, because it wasn't the ending they expect. People picture the last night of a war as something enormous. Bells, crowds dancing in the street, the whole world exhaling at once. Some places that's exactly what it looked like. That's not how it went for us. Word came through in pieces, half confirmed, passed man to man before anyone official said a word. Nobody quite believed it at first. We'd been braced for so long that the bracing didn't know how to switch off just because someone told it to. We were in a field, not a town, nowhere near a crowd. A few men cheered briefly, and then didn't quite know what to do with themselves after the cheering stopped. Somebody built a small fire, more out of habit than need. We sat around it the way we'd sat around 100 fires before that, except this time nobody had anything urgent to say. Someone finally asked what everyone was thinking about going home. Most of us didn't have a real answer. We'd thought about home so many times as an idea that having it actually arrive felt strange, almost unfamiliar. A few men cried quietly, without making much of it, and nobody commented on it, because by then there wasn't any need to explain a thing like that to each other. I remember looking around at the faces in that firelight and doing the arithmetic without meaning to. Who was there? Who wasn't? It wasn't a joyful count. It was just an honest one, and I made it anyway. We didn't sleep much, but not from fear this time, from not knowing what to do with a night that wasn't waiting for anything anymore. That was new. 4 years of waiting, and then suddenly there was nothing left to wait for, and it took a while to know what to do with the space it left behind. I'd pictured that night differently for a long time. I'd pictured it loud. What I got instead was a small fire, a few quiet men, and an ending that didn't announce itself the way I'd always assumed an ending would. Not victory, just quiet. That's what stayed with me. Not the news itself, the particular unremarkable quiet that came after it, in a field with men I'd sat beside for years, none of us quite sure yet how to be finished. So that's 5 nights, out of thousands. And I could probably find you 5 more if you gave me an afternoon. Not the landing everyone already knows, not the campaign, not the maps, not the dates historians argue over. The nights. The first one taught me that shared fear weighs less than fear you're carrying alone. The second one never resolved, and I've made peace with that. The third showed me what real generosity looks like, offered by people who had almost nothing left to give. The fourth taught me that just sitting with someone is its own kind of help, even when you can't fix anything. And the fifth taught me that an ending rarely arrives the way you'd pictured it. When you're young, you think a war is measured by what happens in the big moments, the ones that end up in the books. When you get to be my age, you understand it was actually measured in all the small ones nobody thought to write down. I still catch myself, now and then, thinking about a boy on a ship, worrying over the mail. I still wonder about a daughter in a village whose name I never wrote down. I still hear 4 notes of a song nobody could place, hummed in the rain. The history remembers Omaha. That's fair. It should. But what I carry isn't the beach at all. It's a handful of ordinary nights around it, the ones nobody put in any book. And at 99, those are still the ones I reach for first. Books close. Nights like that don't. They just stay quietly for as long as you do.